Now you may begin.
All right. I'm having a little technical difficulties here. So Sarah, why don't you go ahead and do intro and get us started, and I'm going to figure out how to manage this.
Sounds great. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Steve. Hi, thanks for having us, everyone. Nice to see the faces that are on, and it's okay that if you don't, no worries. My name is Sarah Ruggiero Kirby. I am the secondary science specialist or teacher on special assignment for Eugene School District 4J and coordinator of outdoor school for our district. And steering committee member of Oregon Educators for Climate Education, which presumably is why you're here today. So thanks for being here. Tana, go ahead.
And hi, I'm Tana Shepard. I'm a K-12 TOSA for climate energy conservation here in Eugene 4J. I am the coordinator for 4J eWeb Education Partnership, and I'm also a steering committee member of OECE. And so we're really grateful to be able to present to you today. So thank you for being here.
Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and I am just going to pop this, the link to the slides in the chat. So you can kind of peruse at your own leisure. It's filled with resources, including the slideshows that we're going to share with you today that are kind of hot linked too. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So if you would, we recognize that this is short on time, but it's always good to read your audience, know your audience, right? So if you wouldn't mind, pretty please, go ahead and put your name, pronouns, grade level or district or whatever your role is in your career. If you're a teacher or you work for a children's museum or some other capacity, that would be awesome if you could put that in the chat. Just so we kind of know who we're talking to. It'd be great to know if there's, elementary school teachers out there or high school or some combination. I know there's community partners here too, which is awesome. And then as folks are doing that, it's just always nice to see who we have. Oh, and also like your location, that would be super wonderful. I guess that would show up in the district part, but just seeing where we're all coming from. Thank you. Oh yeah, Dan, I thought I recognized your name. That's great for being here.
Hi, Larry.
Hi, Larry. Yeah, and some familiar names and faces. So thanks, and a lot of folks I don't recognize or know. So thanks for having us. And as people are filling that in. Oh, this is great. Thank you. So from Redmond, Medford, Hillsborough, Newport. Oh, cool. The aquarium. Catholic Middle School. Where's that, Allison? Columbia Gorge Community College, Lake Oswego, Friends of Outdoor School. Awesome. What's SPS district?
Springfield Public Schools. I'm at Thurston Middle School.
Oh, right. Awesome. Welcome. Right down the street. Okay, cool. Awesome. And then if you would also please, this is just kind of an experiment Tana and I did in another presentation we did. Just, if you think of the words, climate change or climate change education, either one of those, because since we're short on time, when you hear, those words, climate change or climate change education, kind of what comes to mind? Just to, and I'm sure that some people could write entire, pages on these, but just kind of, what pops into the front of your brain in terms of just words or pairs of words, opportunities. Yes.
And the worrisome on just what is presented. Agree.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that. Yep. Good.
Yeah, they were ahead of the curve.
Complexity, anxiety, yeah. Worrisome. Well, understanding and awareness. Hi, Alfonso. That's great.
Mm.
Overwhelming grief. Yeah. Understand and look at as a society. So important for the now and the future. Pushback for sure. Oh, goodness. Yep. Difficult to know how to make changes and what's happening now. Yep.
And the idea of that the kids think, feel like it's their problem to solve, and it's really all of our problem to solve together.
Cool. We'll keep, flooding the chat with thoughts, even as they come up, or just if you're still typing. That's how I always am. I'm still typing and people are moving on. But and anybody want to just unmute and say what your thoughts are? Feel free. We would love to have this just be sort of like a give and take conversation, to whatever extent you're interested. Okay. All right. So, for the record, we've done this in a couple of different, settings. We just did an EEA, Eugene Education Association webinar workshop. So that was Bethel and Springfield and Eugene. And a lot of the same questions, concerns, thoughts, the pushback, the anxiety, and so on. So, and that really tends to be the conversation that we have with many people as we've been having conversations in all sorts of different pockets across the state these days. So, and also with the kids, which I'm sure if you're involved with kids directly, then you're probably seeing that too. Okay, cool. Well, we're going to move on to the next part. And we just kind of wanted to, this is you, Tana. Go ahead. Take it away.
Okay, just a couple of goals for just to keep us on track and on time. So essentially, what does climate ed look across K-12? Just a brief snapshot of that. Introducing Oregon Educators for Climate Education and SB 854. And then we have some resources, and then we'd love to do a Q&A and offer you some ways to get involved.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead. This is you too.
Yeah, this is me too. So just briefly, you could even close your eyes. So I definitely could tell that your responses were around climate change, maybe around climate change education as well. But sort of as you think about elementary school kids, they can be as young as 5 years old, all the way up to our young adults at 18. What does it, as you, just think about what to you, before you hear from us, maybe, what does it look like, sound like, and feel like across the grade levels? And just take a brief beat to just kind of get that in your mind of some thoughts that you might have, or questions even. And then let's go ahead and advance the slide.
Mm-hmm. Or do we want to give a moment to share
Or
out?
give a second to share out. Sure. If you have a thought, you can feel free to unmute, feel free to type in the chat. If you are typing in the chat, or even if you're being verbal, if you would let us know the grade level you're thinking of, or all the grade levels, whatever you're thinking as you comment, that would be terrific. So feel free to unmute or chat, just what do you think it might look, sound, or feel like in those areas?
Yes, and K, from kindergarten on, recording local weather stats. My sense is that people are typing.
Yeah, they're typing, or you might not be sure, and it's okay to just be like, that's why I'm here. You tell me. That's okay too.
Awesome. So elementary and preschool learning about climate in general, what is it versus weather, right? Community justice, focus, phenomena, and problems. Yep. Middle school opening conversation, exploring data. Yeah. Primary grades, recycling, trying to figure out what to do with plastics. Concerned about the animals and habitat. Yes, exactly. Oh, I love that. Little ones with rakes pulling ivy. So community projects.
Mm.
Paying attention, reporting info about land, water around us. Yeah, joyful learning at all grades, hopefully.
Yes.
Environmental clubs in middle. Building skills for evaluating competing claims, agency and voice, creating and implementing solutions. Great.
Mm. Mm.
Tribes, climate adaptation plans. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. That's great.
Cool.
Really helpful.
Yeah. So,
You want to go?
yeah. So
Just
just generally,
briefly.
oh, sorry. What were you saying?
Oh,
Just
no,
quick.
just briefly, we're going to do this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in general, we've all got our pockets, our specialties and our specialty areas, right? And that's kind of why Tana and I teamed up on this. I've never taught elementary school other than just outdoor education and that piece, but specifically for middle school, and high school, it looks quite different. And we have gotten a little bit of pushback in conversations about people going like, oh, climate change is too scary for kindergartners, or what is that like for, second graders and so on. And so really, Tana, you should speak to the K-5 part, and then we can speak more generally.
So essentially, this is kind of just the framework that I thought of when I was reinventing the program that I'm teaching in, and our water and electric board is really interested in climate adaptation and mitigation. And it's like, well, we aren't really teaching anything about that at school. So what does that actually mean? And so that's kind of where these little themes came from. So especially pre-K 2, it's more, as some of you mentioned, but it's like, knowing our planet, knowing that you're a human on a planet and that there are living systems that are connected and that everything that's living is interconnected and especially like weather patterns, things like that. Getting the kids outside regularly and understanding and making that connection to the planet so that they're growing to really love the planet, which is where 3rd through 5 really starts to, they notice things, they notice everything. And so how do you fit on the planet? What are some things, some small things you can do to make a difference within your school or within your community? And then, kind of then getting into the middle and high school areas, which Sarah can speak to.
Yeah, and I know that all of the folks on here are educators, so it's just looking for those pockets of what's age appropriate. So more critical thinking. I loved how somebody said looking at data and kind of being analyzing data in middle school, and then for the high schools in particular and middle schools really is just starting to look for solutions and creative problem solving. And also one thing that we've and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into the integration piece, but a lot of the high schoolers that we work with and have spoken with in both as a teacher but also in this work is they're feeling like the only way that they can make a difference is in these climate marches, right? Or expressing themselves in these climate marches, but to even just look at what are different ways that activism, what does activism look like in terms of writing and art and artistic expressions and so on. So there's lots of opportunities there. So we just kind of wanted to see, and it just in general kind of get a read of the room, where your heads are at and kind of just kind of feeling that out. I do love this quote. It's one of my all-time favorites, and I truly believe it really is a little bit of the backbone of why I do this particular work and just in general education, which I've been teaching environmental science for about 25 years now, in various grade levels, middle and high school. So all right.
And with me for elementary, I mean, it's been about 20 years also, same, but at the younger spectrum. And I just wanted to actually jump back to Leah's quote about joyful learning for all grades, hopefully. And that's really a big part of this bill and this work is really taking the storyline out of that doom and gloom place that we are sort of stuck in right now, and that we have to fight for our future. And yeah, that's still true, but what we're noticing after decades of doing this work is that the fighting words are falling on deaf ears. And so we need to help our kids articulate in a different way around their activism. And so, as Sarah was saying, it isn't always marching out or doing something like that. It could be some other form of activism and writing your representative, or starting some kind of a program in your school that you care about, or, there's all kinds of ways to be active. And so just overall, that's really kind of the messages through Hope and Solution with the work moving forward with this climate bill.
Yeah, great. Yes, empowered problem solvers. That's great. That's a kind of a theme of what we've been sharing out. Yes, exactly. So we wanted to, this whole webinar just kind of came out of a conversation that I was having with Steve about, what's going on with this. And honestly, it's just a handful of educators, teachers, Tana and myself and a handful of others that just in conversations with students in Eugene, it really just kind of has ballooned out. So I wanted to just share these couple of links, but I'm going to click on one of them that's going to take us to a different slideshow. But just for the record, this Oregon Educators for Climate Education, that's a link to our website. This SB 854 flyer is a one-pager that we created that's just kind of meant to just be printed and handed off, or you can send it in an email as a PDF. It's just kind of like all of the information compiled into one convenient flyer. But what we wanted to just take a little bit of time with today, and can you see my slide? Is it the whole page? Okay, so it's not like you don't see my desktop in the background. Okay, sweet. So because it's messy. So this is these are the slides that we shared with the Senate Education Committee just last week. And so it's our most comprehensive and also compacted story. And so we won't go into too much detail, but all of these are hot linked. There's, we were talking about, as part of this is a little bit of convincing legislators, is it important? Why should it be legislated? Why should this be larger than just the NGS, the next generation science standards, which they clearly say. So we kind of called out the Oregon Health Authority report on climate anxiety, all sorts of news articles cropping up, and that continues to blossom even just today and yesterday. And really, Sarah Stapleton is a faculty member at U of O in science education, and she's really into the data and the reports that support, why, if this is important, why are teachers not teaching it? Is there support for it large scale? And the research says that there is support for it. And so then our question is so why isn't it happening? Why is it not more broad strokes? We also looked at other states. So New Jersey was kind of our focal point for a little while, just because they are the one state that have K-12, integrated across disciplines. As a side note, that state did the work based on, it was the governor's wife who sort of had it as, I don't want to say a pet project, but that was like her initiative, right? And so it had governor level support. Connecticut, it was proposed by state legislators. It's 512. It's just on the edge of beginning. Washington, you may be familiar, if we're in the Pacific Northwest, you're probably familiar with Climb Time, which is K-12 science, like kind of only science. I don't want to say only, but because it's integrated as well, but it is specifically for science classes and science lessons. And again, it had a great support from the governor because it was his mandate. And so there's a lot of funding tied to it. And then California, it has, is working on it too. It's in collaboration with their UC schools and their CSUs and their school districts. So those are kind of the big sort of things happening around climate education across the United States. And so we really wanted to do our own thing and also make it more comprehensive, more robust, and it kind of grew out of this this summit that we had right before the pandemic started. We invited, in fact, it was Tana and Janoj that generated this summit, where teachers and students from across our school district came together and just were like, hey, what does climate change education look like? Are you teaching it? Are you learning it? What does it look like in 4J in the school district? And, teachers K-12 got up and said in their pockets of schools across the district, this is what I'm doing. This is the lesson I do. And they were great lessons. And all of my kids, there's a little picture of them here that I brought from the Rachel Carson Academy. They were like, what the heck? We didn't get any of that, and that was kind of the broad consensus among our high school students was, if you didn't have those specific teachers that loved it or had their amazing unit or whatever, like it was just in pockets of excellence. And so they felt sort of short shrifted, and it kind of just grew. And as we dove into the pandemic, the kids just kind of wanted to keep meeting. And so we met with the ODE, with Jamie Rummage and the science specialists at ODE, and the kids presented to them saying, we want this to be more widely supported and widespread. ODE was like, Jamie basically was like, hey, let's bring this to the Council of State Supervisors. So that was, science specialists from every state. And that was a really powerful presentation that students made. They basically told their climate stories. And it was wonderful. So this is kind of how it grew. And ODE has said that, without it being legislated, it can't really be funded or supported. I mean, we had a meeting with Colt Gill early on the process, and he said, as long as it's not legislated, there can't really be a funded position to support widespread, broad scale climate education, which is honestly why I personally got into it myself.
Same. Yeah. And just listening to the kids, like, and essentially it was like, okay, the kids want this. Colt Gill is saying that. So we got to legislate it. And that's kind of how we haven't really known what we're doing. And here we are. And, it's pretty exciting. By the way, since I just stole the floor all of a sudden, I did put a link. This is not in a slideshow, but there is a link to the ODE presentation that the kids did. It is extremely moving. It's about 45 minutes long. It was as short as I could cut it. But if you really want to hear some passionate kids, and it essentially led them to the Science Consortium and on into a few other presentations. As kids graduate, other kids are jumping up, and this is our third, or actually our, kind of going into our fourth year working with kids on this. So just to get that out there, if you want a little inspiration with your, whatever your dinner or beverage later, you might want to watch that, get a tissue.
Yeah. So as Tana said, we're just teachers. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. So we sort of looked at it as modeled after SB 13, the Tribal History, Shared History, and SB 664, the Genocide Holocaust Studies. We kind of liked how they had learning concepts and that could just be sort of integrated in. So it's not like we hear questions like, well, who's going to determine the curriculum? And we're like, whoa, this is not curriculum. This is integrated learning concepts, like how it can be kind of inserted into what you're already teaching, what lessons or units you can be, presenting in your class, how they can be tweaked to incorporate more specific climate science or climate conversations. This is I'm not going to click on it because I don't know if it'll bring me back, but it's just sort of argument for place-based, like the sort of the positives around place-based education. And so that was the other thing. We didn't want this to be like, hey, this is Eugene people telling the rest of the state what to do, or even the I-5 corridor where there tends to be.
Or there's a polar bear on the iceberg again. Like, we didn't want it to be that either, bringing it closer to home so that kids could actually start making a difference in our state. So,
right. So we really have tried to, stick to the ideas of, that it could be teacher created, teacher generated lessons across the state that are relevant, in Pendleton or LeGrand versus, Newport or whatever. So it really is kind of framed in that way. And, not to get too much in the weeds, but oh gosh, where am I? Hang on a second. There we are. a lot of legislators and a lot of people, have asked, so what does it look like in second grade? And what does this look like in an art class? It'll depend. But here's just some examples. Like, so this is, this upper corner right here is a DLI, a DLI curriculum, the direct learning. Is that right? Is that what it stands for? It's like dual language instruction. That's what it stands for, dual language instruction. So we've just adopted dual language instruction curriculum, and it's got all sorts of, in fact, here's one of the lab notebooks. It's got all sorts of science integrated into their language arts and their reading and writing. And that's another push that we've heard a lot of, is like, well, kids need to focus on reading, writing, and math. And so our hope is that you can read this children's book as part of your ELA, your English language arts curriculum, which it's part of the one that we just adopted, and just add a couple little extra parts about wind energy as a renewable resource. And so just looking for ways to integrate these science concepts and climate concepts into all subject areas. We've heard that that's what kids are interested in. Think about kids that want to hear and learn about animals. They love that stuff, animals and habitats. So that's a natural segue into climate, just a couple little climate conversations and how things are changing.
Sarah, thinking about that presenter, I'm not sure if anyone on this call was at the OSTA conference last year, but the keynote speaker, how do you teach whale, that has just stuck with me since then. And that's really the idea, especially in elementary. You've got them all day. Like, you can integrate around a topic within reason with pullouts and all the things, but you could really integrate around a topic and spread it out across in my opinion, that's what I did in my class, was just kind of do that. But that speaker talking about, well, like, how do we teach whale? That was so powerful, because we also have a lot of folks like, oh, we've got all these behaviors, or, oh, we've got all this stuff, or we've got this COVID, kids are behind in COVID, we can only do the core subjects. And really part of the reason that, in my opinion, part of the reason that kids are sort of floundering right now, maybe with their behavior and things, is because it is so direct and we're so focused on them being behind that we aren't really like digging in deep the way that they would like us to right now. And I think that when we do, especially through science and environmental ed, behavior problems go down actually when they're outside more. So.
Right. And then also, of course, just down here at the bottom, this is kind of my jam, is the CTE and career pathways. So, so a lot around community resilience, which is a real, sort of important key part to, the economies in Eastern Oregon, is just what do resilient communities look like? How do we, increase opportunities for stewardship, innovative economic solutions. So there's a lot of opportunities there for kids, for the older kids, to really see, what could they do as a career or a job path, right? Even in public health, and the impacts of climate change on public health are incredible opportunities for learning. So I want to, make sure that we're not getting too much in the weeds, but there are links here for our learning concepts, the actual learning concepts that we've identified in the draft language. And, again, it was like I borrowed the learning concepts from the Genocide Holocaust learning concept idea, like in terms of how it gets integrated. Just sort of some more ideas in terms of the bill basics. And then, I think that's probably, I don't want to, you can peruse the rest of these slides on your own, because it kind of gets in the weeds. As I said, we presented this to the Senate Education Committee to kind of just make our case. Tana, do you want to speak to the subject of climate?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to. So it's kind of a boon that there's a new kid on the block with climate education resources, and their name is Subject to Climate. And so this is a resource that I found last spring, and then they found us and the work that we're doing. I guess it was sort of summertime. And so we started speaking with them, and really the thing that I like about them, I'll just do a quick commercial, is like I kept like testing them like, oh, I really like this one from Climate Generation. Is it on there? Oh yeah, there it is. Or, oh, I really like this other one from, you know, the Smithsonian. Oh yeah, there it is. And so everything was included. And so they have offered to work with our OECE group in tandem with this legislative work to build a hub that, so essentially, let me back up. They worked with New Jersey, who is the first state across our union to have legislative climate education across the subject areas. The others that Sarah mentioned earlier are more of a science focus, which is more typical. And so they built a really nice hub for New Jersey and worked on it with New Jersey teachers. And essentially, New Jersey did standards tweaks across all of their standards. And that's kind of how they were doing ours. Ours is a little bit different. So we have submitted, I think, 11 lessons so far to them that we created last summer in a summer institute with teachers. So all written by Oregon teachers, Oregon focus, working with our, you know, learning concepts that we identified, in particular place-based and tribal history, shared history, ethnic studies, a few other things. So this one that Sarah is showing on the screen now is an exemplar lesson that we gave them, and we thought it was really good. And then they showed it to us, and it was like sort of like going to the eye doctor. Is lens 1 or lens 2? Lens 1 or lens 2? And we were like, oh, lens 2. And so this one is just, it's gorgeous what they did with it. And so this is actually a social studies lesson, Water is Life, written by a middle school teacher here in Oregon. And then, yeah, we just tried to give a smattering of different lessons to them to bring up to the hub. And that should actually be live in the next few weeks, actually, which is amazing. And hopefully will continue to grow as this legislation goes to being passed, because I'm going to talk about it like that. It will be passed. So we'll see what happens. So yeah, teacher created. And it's just like the search feature is beautiful on this too. Like if you're a teacher and you are, you know, like I'll just use 4th grade as an example. Like I teach 4th grade and I want something that has to do with climate action and art and social studies, and you could click in those things and it would bring up like several lessons that would work for those categories. Every lesson is vetted by teachers, by scientists, and some editors as well. And so they're all ready to go. It's completely free for teachers, and it's one of the most beautiful resources I've seen for a while now. And it's just super user friendly too. The font is even nice, like the pictures are good. So Sarah's kind of just showing you there just how quickly all the standards are delineated. They always include the science notes, which are really cool. And so yeah, just overall, we're super excited that they reached out and want to do the work alongside us. So
Great, thank you. Yeah. So that has been another question is, you know, how do we get resources to teachers? And that's like the question is like, what's the curriculum? And again, we want to reiterate, there is no curriculum, you know, there's resources that are, you know, and this, as Tana said, this was kind of just such a win because we were trying to figure out how do we pull all the resources? How do we make it place-based? How do we make it teacher generated, teacher user friendly, and so on? And so this was just really kind of such a lucky opportunity for them to reach out to us. And so as Tana mentioned, this is one of the ones that the Oregon teachers created last summer. Okay, so that's kind of the slides. I think that's it, right, for that one. So we'll go back to our main show. Yeah. And
I kind of covered some of it too, Sarah, actually just now, so we can kind of
yeah. One thing that
I guess, should we just tell them what's here and then not necessarily, because you'll probably want to use this as a resource to dig into further. This particular slide that's in front of you now is a list of they're called one-pagers. Some of them are more than that, but essentially these are each of the various things that we spelled out in the bill highlighted, and there just gives information about what we were thinking when we put this together. In particular, the learning concepts that Sarah's bringing up now is really the backbone of the bill. and I think it's A through M now. There are lots of things. This has some example guiding questions. There are 1,000,001 guiding questions you could come up with. These are just some examples. But I think that the one-pagers are helpful moving forward. We had the teachers last summer use them to either write a new lesson or take a lesson that they already did and kind of put the climate spin on it and look at it through that lens. And we were pretty happy with how they were able to use the tools. And so we just decided to, keep a hold of them and keep sharing them, because it is helpful to just, if you're not sure where to dig in or what, take a lesson and take it in that direction. I found, and I frankly used some. I wrote a lesson and this was super helpful to me. It had been a minute since I had written a fully fleshed lesson to share out with others. That was super helpful. And so, yeah, this is just one of the one-pagers.
Great. All righty. So let me go back to, sorry. Oh gosh. Let me move that. Sorry. So getting back to this, the other thing, the one I showed you was just kind of looking through the learning concepts and being like, okay, these are the questions that I could ask as part of my unit. But, these are more like, here's some ways to think about place-based education, how it can integrate with Indigenous studies and differentiated instruction and so on. The other thing we wanted to just share was the resources that we've been kind of accumulating as being kind of either the most helpful and full-bodied, or in the case of this regeneration one, it's the most beautiful resource we've ever seen. And it's, it's the Paul Hawken regeneration, the idea of regenerating climate and our planet in one generation. And as an AP environmental science, college now environmental science teacher, every single thing that I covered, trophic cascades, the peatlands as carbon sequestration and carbon sinks. There's even one down here around the education of girls, which is, every single thing that I ever taught in my AP environmental science class is noted, and it's in this just beautiful exploratory way, net zero cities and so on. So that we just wanted to include some of our favorite resources. That's the regeneration one. And then and
that's based off Paul Hawken's original drawdown. And then people kept saying, well, that's nice. So there's all these drawdowns. What are the solutions? And so that's what regeneration is really. It's a beautiful text as well. We've had some teachers dig in and use it as a textbook and just pilot that for some lessons last year that went pretty well. And really, it was kind of an inspiration for us too. And it really spoke to what the kids were saying about regenerating the planet within the generation, because that's what's necessary for us to draw down to the level we need to be drawn down to. So, yeah.
All right. And I think, just sort of things to think about if you're a classroom teacher, or if you're an educator in the moment, thinking about a lesson or a subject that you're teaching where you could, look through the subject to climate and pull out a new lesson or unit to incorporate. Also just thinking about what are the barriers. And when I think about what some of you were putting in the chat, around pushback and resistance to teaching it, that's also one of the reasons why we're legislating it, so that teachers have the support and backing. You can just be like, look, it's the law, like I gotta teach it, instead of catching flack. And that I know that happens. I've certainly had that experience over the course of my teaching career. More resources, just some these are more like articles related, so if you are interested in sharing them out. This one, these are just most recent ones that have really grabbed my attention. This positive feedback loops, dang, this was crazy. They had a story on OPB about it. I think it was a week ago or two, and they were highlighting this study from OSU that was not great news around feedback loops making climate action more urgent. And they named in the report, they named like, I think it was either 12 or 15 significant feedback loops, which will, the positive feedback loops, which I always had to remind my kids that doesn't mean it's a good thing. It just means that it's going to come barreling forward, right? And so these two in particular, I thought were really interesting, and also great resource for place-based, another place-based lesson or unit around feedback loops and specific ones to Oregon.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is there.
And the very last one actually was an article that just came out last week that was very timely. It was before we went up to Salem to speak, but that literally came out the day before that. And it was like, oh, well, if it is so important, why aren't we teaching it? And so this is a great read. Actually, they did a really nice slant on it. And yeah, I recommend reading that one because it's very, it just came out last week, or I guess March 3rd, not last week, 10 days ago.
I also like how that was in the education week. So it was an education, media piece instead of, the New York Times or something like that. No dissing on the New York Times, but so it was like education specific. And then lastly, this is just, this is hot linked right here. It just goes to our, gee dang it.
Oh.
Apparently it was not.
Mm.
Oh gosh. So I will hot link this because it takes it should take you right to sort of all of these specific hot links where it's like, what are the key talking points? Here's a formal letter of support if you want to use it as a template and share that out with your colleagues in circles and or write one yourselves. But those are ways for you to get involved. Okay. Oh, and Tana's going to her phone. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, so I'll be available on my phone, but we were just going to basically get into a Q&A to end us off with. And so, yeah, but I'm still here. I'm just switching devices.
Any thoughts, questions, ideas, concerns? Yeah, Leah.
I just first want to recognize all the work you've done, and I have so much gratitude as a parent and an educator in Oregon. Thank you for everything you've done. I know this has been a huge amount of work and a huge lift. So first and foremost, thank you.
Yeah,
This is so important. Something I've been thinking about is we know Governor Kotek's really going hard with literacy, which she should, because our literacy scores are terrible. And this is like total injustice to students that they're not learning to read. I think something I've been thinking about a lot coming from the STEM focused space is the importance to, and I think you brought this up, but I just want to reiterate it, that it's not literacy or climate education. It's not literacy or STEM, that these things support each other, and our students will be better readers if they understand content and they know what they're reading about. And I think we just need to really think about that message of it's the and, because so often in all of our spaces, people want to frame things as it's this or that. Like, it's not this or that. We can have both, and both are actually going to strengthen each other. So I think when we think about how we're going to respond to Governor Kotek's priorities, I feel like that's just important messaging. And if we can all kind of be united in that message, I think it'll go a lot further.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that. It's crazy. Like this whole thing has just been kind of a blur and a whirlwind, honestly. But I had this conversation with the AP news person, and she was like, we hear that kids can't read and write. And I was like, well, I'm not saying that we should throw those things out the window. It's like, yes. So the yes and piece is the thing that I really like that drumbeat, it's yes and in the context. And a perfect example, especially with the math piece, is we have a student at Churchill who's one of our kind of leaders in this work. She gives this example of like, she could kind of care less about math, but if like her teachers give her an assignment that's about like the rate of oil flowing out of an oil spill in a tanker, she will solve that math problem, or at least she'll dig into it and put her full effort in. And so, yes, exactly. So then the math has the context. Exactly. And I just want to give a little shout out to Stacy in Springfield. Sorry if that's okay, word on the street is that like Springfield has been told to not teach science and to really focus on reading and writing. And I'm like, oh, and I know that a lot of the teachers over there are, yes, okay, and I should let you speak to it, certainly if you want, but I've had conversations where I'm like, okay, well, just read about science, but that's not like doing science either, right? Journaling, going outside and doing writing about science. Go ahead, Stacy, you're shaking your head.
No, you're hitting the nail on the head. We haven't been specifically told not to teach science, but of course the emphasis is on math and language arts.
Mhm.
And that's great, but science is important too. I mean, you don't have those, science is part of everything, right? We know that. So I have been going out of my way, like I have the environmental science club now. And so we, just trying to kind of get kids outside more in their studies in science so that they can make those connections between math and what's happening outside. And I have them right. So they have their literacy stuff outside, even in science. So you're saying that yes, and
Yes.
that's huge.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's also, there's also, there's the other side of this is the culture wars piece, which is such a bummer and such a disservice, and missed opportunity as a CTE person, right? Like, so I think that, it's immediately going to, you're indoctrinating our kids, you're teaching them what to think. And, it's not like it's that it can't be a yes and there as well, like that community resilience and innovative strategies and public health impacts from wildfire smoke and the strain on our public health systems, or our hospitals, especially in rural communities, all of those are concerns to, smaller rural communities, especially in the eastern part of the state. And, so they want to have those conversations and they don't, not maybe the connection just hasn't been made that is like having those discussions is part of climate education, how to adapt and mitigate and, build resilient communities and so on. So I think that there's real opportunities there too. I just find it to be a kind of a bummer that it's getting divisive language attention. That's just been a bummer. I got lots of country, what I like to call country kids that buck hay and hunt and fish and, are concerned about their hunting grounds and their cattle, their cattle lands, their ranch lands. So it's not an either or there either, in my opinion.
And I guess I would add to like the part about it being like too gloomy or scary. Like, I guess I would push back against that in that, won't it be scarier if kids aren't prepared and don't understand what's happening? And then just like with COVID, it hit and it was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so if we're likening, learning about climate change to that, then the answer is yes, we must do it because it will actually alleviate some fear, being able to actually talk about it and start to think in solutionary ways rather than just, my carbon life is 10 years or whatever. Some of the kids are saying I guess that's really sort of our job as teachers moving forward with this is to learn up ourselves what, how to do it, but then also be able to help students, work through their feelings and thoughts about this and really make space for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tana. Yeah, other thoughts? Larry, I also see in the chat, what were some of the students' takeaways from presenting to the Senate Education Committee? I don't know, honestly, like, I don't know what, like Tana and I had to like zip off to teach this education, the EEA thing right after. So we didn't even get a chance to like sit down and debrief really even as a team, but we had, let's see, we had about 7 kids in person, from, I think they were like 3 from Lake Oswego, a couple from Westview, kind of up in that area, 1 from Eugene, and then we had a variety Zoom in. 1 student from Bend, and then a couple others, I can't remember where they're from, but, you know, pretty good representation. But we were also told relatively early on, or I guess I should say relatively close to the actual public hearing, we were told that there may not be time for public testimony. And that was the case once we got there. It was just like it was just like we were all smushed into a very short time frame of speaking. But I do love that the chair of the education committee, Senator Dumbro, made a point of hearing, like, you know, hearing from all of the kids. He wanted to make sure that all the kids got pulled up and said their piece. And he also asked on the Zoom, on the big screen, like, any other kids out there that are, you know, here to speak. So I thought that was really wonderful. And, you know, I mean, that's kind of an ask for you all, if I may, to just, you know, spread the word within your circles, your networks, your student groups, you know, these resources that we shared, especially on that last slide. You know, there's a letter template that you can, I mean, you know, I'm not saying like go make your kids write letters, but, you know, just sort of offer it as a writing opportunity, you know, and just kind of share out, because I have to say that, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Tana, but we were a little taken aback by the fact that was as much opposition as opposite testimony that was submitted. And we had like a nice, you know, rally toward right at the end, but we felt like there were a lot of opportunities for letters of support from the vast reaches of our networks. And so I would ask that if you could share it out, that would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And I guess what I would add is something that kept coming up was in some of the opposition letters, and just things that people have been saying in opposition, is the idea that this would be indoctrination. And that is actually the opposite of what we're trying to create here. What we've found with both of us being basically up, you know, K-12 between the two of us, is that has been the case over the decades, that some community partners come in being very mean well, but really end up, you know, kind of dropping the mic and walking out. And then the kids are like, oh, well, what just happened here? And they, you know, and then sometimes some of the learning is more, you should think like this, instead of opening up, you know, a problem and having kids start to critically think about it and problem solve for themselves. And so that's really a big part of this too, is getting kids to be free thinking, you know, people in a democratic society, so they can make some choices of their own. And so just to be clear about that, because that is something that is going to be something we have to kind of work against, unfortunately, with some of the other opposition. So
Dan, go ahead. Hi.
Hey, thanks, Sarah and Tana, for this really rich presentation. I mean, just amazing. And for all the work that you're doing, really, really important. I was thinking about, I understand that maybe OSBA has either been considering or has come out as opposed, and COSA is considering the same or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. And so less concerned about, or less wondering about culture war opposition, and more about the opposition that where you have systems that are concerned about an unfunded mandate, or about yet another layer of responsibility on the part of school districts. I'm wondering what your response is to those concerns in the political sphere, and if those of us out here are communicating, if there's, you know, if you have just thoughts about that.
Yeah, totally. So that's such a great question. In fact, Janoj, our colleague, who's the social studies counterpart to us, he's had a really great exchange with the OSBA board, and I guess lobbyists, I think they were, I don't know, somebody in.
Yes.
So the pushback we were getting was around some of the language that okay, full disclosure, we were like, how do we do this, right? And how do we fund this? And because we didn't, you know, and we've been in our position where, like, do we ask for it to be funded because we all know what unfunded mandates do, right? But then we're like, but then it'll die in the Ways and Means Committee if we tie funding to it. So we've really been going back and forth about that. In one of our initial iterations, which is the one that made it into the review committee, it tied funding, SIA funding, to their compliance, to like doing to having a plan. And everybody was like, "Wow, don't take away our SIA funding." Fair, but we were like, "Oh, just kidding." I mean, not just kidding, but we were kind of like, well, it was just an idea because we thought, how are we going to get school districts to do this? In fact, it's interesting if you look at Carrie's thing in the chat, she's saying that SB 13 is not being utilized in any wide reaching in the neck of the woods. So, so there it is, right? We were like, great, we're going to just do another thing like SB 13 where they're being told to do it, but they really won't. So that was the idea of tying it to the SBA money. We changed, we revised that to pull out that punitive piece, and that language hasn't been like showed out yet. That is an amendment that's being worked on, so that there won't be, a punitive effect of having it tied to the SIA money. Now leaves us with like, so how do we fund it? And we've been having conversations, with all sorts of people. Do we just kind of, and no real good answers. Everything from like the cat tax. We talked with Senator Prozansky at one point, and he was sort of throwing out some ideas like the cat tax, the Inflation Reduction Act. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Alfonso. Is there any like connection that we could tap into? It's a drop in the bucket for some of those big pools of money that are tied for, energy and innovation at the state level. There's, this is going to sound really ignorant because I don't know what it's called exactly, but we just were told by someone in the LeGrand area about a grant that's like renewable energy tied. Does anybody know anything about that? It's just been like, it just came on our radar. So I feel like we haven't figured that part out yet. And that's the funding piece that really freaked out the OSBA, and the Redmond School District wrote in and they were like, we do not support that. You're going to take away our SIA money. That's a hard no.
So
Thanks,
Sarah,
for addressing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Dan, good to see you again. So Sarah and Tana, I would just like to thank you both for your bringing this to us, and a great presentation today. And I would like to invite everybody. I just wanted to bring things to a close so that we could give kind of a round of applause and let people go who need to go. And are you able to stay on for a little bit for answering questions?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so what we'll do, I would like everyone, if you can, to unmute and maybe show your video, and we'll do kind of a round of applause and a thank you. And
thank you.
Thanks,
so thank you
everybody.
very much.